What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2019 Mazda CX-3 Grand Touring all-wheel drive. Huge thanks to Mazda for providing me with this very cool little CX-3 to review for you guys today. So about the CX-3, well, had a very light refresh for 2019 here, but it didn't really need much change because it still looks fantastic. I absolutely love, especially in this soul red metallic paint, it just really pops. But I really love how you have a little bit of a sharper nose there up front. That's a signature trait of all these Mazdas these days, and just looks so good. And they get those piercing headlamps with the nice little LED accents that also look very attractive. Coming down to the sides, I also really love, this body line that flows starting from the hood down through the sides and out towards the back there, and looks really good. They didn't go overkill with the black plastic around the fenders and stuff either, even though you have to have that for these small crossovers these days. I think it's very tastefully done. I like these 18-inch wheels as well. I think those look really good. I also really like the C-pillar treatment there, how they kind of painted that little back portion black, and I think that looks pretty nice as well. I also really appreciate that it doesn't look too squished in the back. A lot of these small compact crossovers, they look so squished in the back. It really makes for a disproportional look. This looks very proportional, I think, and a little bit more flowing, and just a little bit of a better look out back there than a lot of the competitors, which I really appreciate. I also really like, the nice LED tail lamps you have here. You also get dual exhaust, which look very good, and a little bit of a sportier touch here for the CX-3. And so overall, I think it's a really good look from just about every angle. As for the interior of the 2019 CX-3, well, it's a pretty nice place to be in a lot of ways. So first off, sitting down in these seats, you have these very nice parchment leather seats here in the Grand Touring trim, the top of the line trim here, and they're very comfortable seats. They also have, with this premium package, memory functionality, as well as power lumbar and power seat adjustment here, and also you have heated seats here as well in the Grand Touring version, which are very nice and very comfortable seats. Really nice and supportive too. I mean, they don't look like they have super aggressive bolstering up here by the torso, but they actually hold you in place really well. Also, thigh support is nice and substantial, and so overall, just very nice, soft, comfortable, but very supportive seats as well. Next to the steering wheel here in the CX-3, which is basically the same as any other Mazda steering wheel, has a nice thinner rim to it, nicely leather wrapped though, has a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, just a few buttons here on it, and this one again being Grand Touring, you have the adaptive cruise, so that is built into the steering wheel functions there as well. But then you even have paddle shifters here in the CX-3, which is also a nice inclusion here, and gives a little bit of a sportier vibe, and so overall just a great steering wheel. Gauges are really nice and simple here in the CX-3, very similar to the Mazda 3 that I reviewed previously, but I just really admire the simplicity of them. You have a nice large tachometer front and center, which is very sporty, and I appreciate that, and you also have a little digital speed readout there in the bottom of it, which is cool. Then on the right hand side, you just have a fuel gauge and a basic trip computer there, with just will calculate your average MPGs and a few other basic things. On the left hand side though, you basically just have a gear position indicator, and then also your trip odometer there, which is very simple. Again, there are some other vehicles that'll have a little bit of a fancier gauge set up here these days in this class, but I think this gets the basics done well, and it just depends on how much tech you want, but I think this will be more than enough for most people with just the basics and nothing additional. One cool feature though you do have with the CX-3, which only a couple other competitors have, is this optional heads-up display, which is only on the Grand Touring trim here of the CX-3, and I'm not a huge fan of these little pop-up ones, but a lot of the other ones in the segment, like the Hyundai Kona, do also have a little pop-up display like that as well. It doesn't work quite as well to me as the actual ones that are projected onto the windshield, because you still have to look down a little bit for these little pop-up ones, but it's cool. And here with the premium package in the Grand Touring version of the CX-3 here, you also do get traffic sign recognition, so it'll highlight speed limits and stop signs, things like that, which is kind of cool, in addition to showing you your speed there. So it's a nice feature, I guess, but certainly something I could live without too. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, up top you have the 7-inch Mazda Connect system here. Now it's unfortunate, this being the top of the line trim, you only still get the 7-inch display, which is a base display in all the other Mazdas in the higher ranges, but still is a good display, still all the same great stuff you get in the 8-inch display, just a little bit smaller, just looks a little small on top of the dash there, but it works the same as all the other Mazda Mazda systems I've reviewed over the past several years, you know, it's touchscreen whenever you're stopped, but then if you're moving, you have to use this controller, which is a nice controller. It always feels great, you know, nice knurled metal on it here, and feels pretty high quality and definitely better than most stuff in this class, so that's still great. Unfortunately, though, there isn't any Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, even though that was promised for other 2019 Mazdas. Unfortunately, the CX-3 doesn't get it here. I thought it was going to get it for 2019, but it is still absent. Now, you can get a retrofit kit from Mazda, any infotainment display from like 2014 and up that has this system in these Mazdas. You can get it retrofitted at your dealer, but it's $200 plus labor, so after it's all said and done, it's about $400. So it is possible to get, and maybe you could negotiate that into the deal if you're wanting that, and just have the dealer do that for you, but it doesn't come standard here on the 2019 CX-3, unfortunately, which is a bummer considering all the competitors basically, especially when you get to their top trim levels, do have it as standard. But anyway, you know, it's still, like I said, a good infotainment display, and it has Sirius XM and all that kind of stuff, and pretty easy to navigate and use. Coming down, you just have your heated seat controls and heated steering wheel control there as well, and then you have auto climate control here in the Grand Touring version as well, but it doesn't show you any displays. It's just, you just go to the auto thing and you still have to slide these little knobs around. So, you know, not quite as high tech as some of the other ones where you can actually have a little display there, but still they work great, and again, more nice metal finishes, or what feels like metal might be plastic, but still feels very nice. And then coming down, you have your first storage space here, which is this nice large deep center cubby. You also find 2 USB jacks and also a power outlet in there, and also an auxiliary jack as well. So great to have all those in a very deep usable space, although it is on a pretty steep incline, so things are going to slide towards the back of it there, but nice nonetheless. Coming back over to the doors here, you have a nice large bottle holder with another little small pocket as well, and so great usable space there. And it's good that it has good bottle holders, because the cup holder setup is really strange in the CX-3. So you have this little area here that's open partially. You have like 1.5 cup holders here out in the open, but as you'll see, there's squares. So first off, this center armrest, we'll get this out of the way. It is nice and softly padded and feels great to rest your elbow on, but anyway, you open that up and it doesn't really seal anything off. It's just over, like hovering over these 2 squares and a rectangle here in the back. So it's just weird. You can use them, I guess, as storage, and I guess they give you the capability to do whatever you want with them, because you hit these little buttons and then you have this little like stabilizer basically that comes and you know, kind of acts as a cup holder, but still not a very secure cup holder by any means. And you know, in your quartering and stuff like that, your drinks are still going to be going left and right, and so not very good cup holder solutions here. I'm not sure what was wrong with just standard, you know, 2 cup holders and a little square you know, cubby area behind it, but they chose to go a little bit of a different route here for whatever reason. I'm personally not a fan of it, but you know, maybe it works for some people, I don't know. But anyway, just a little bit of an interesting thing to note there, but that's about it as far as all the storage space up front here. But 2 other nice little things I do want to mention here about the CX-3 interior that I really like is first off, this nice red accenting you have around these round vents for the air vents, and I think it's just a nice little touch. Also, another thing that's very commendable is you have padded knee rest here by the transmission tunnel, which even in some high-end BMWs, they can't figure out that people want this to be padded. When you're on long trips and you're resting your knee against this, it's really nice to have it padded, and so that's outstanding that the CX-3 has that here, at least on the Grand Touring trim, and again, it's something you really don't see in almost any of the other competitors, so that just gives it a much more premium feeling interior here. Backseat space in the CX-3 isn't great, even in this segment. So obviously, you know, a lot of the other vehicles in this segment are also very tight. These small crossovers are really best used as 2-seaters, but you can use those seats in a pinch. Now, I'm 5'9". Me sitting behind myself, I do fit, but my knees are basically in the seat back there. So anyone taller than 5'9", you're not going to be able to fit back there, at least as far as legroom goes, comfortably. Headroom is pretty plentiful there, so no complaints as far as that goes. But it's just, you know, just feels a little snug back there. You do have a full down center armrest, which has somewhat of a cup holder arrangement there. They kind of pop up, but again, not great cup holders again for the backseat occupants either, but does have a nice soft, you know, armrest there. There's also bottle holders in the doors back there, but that's about it as far as amenities for the rear seat occupants. There aren't any air vents, no USB jacks or anything like that. But a lot of the other competitors in this segment don't have that stuff either. But it's just, you know, not a very roomy back seat. That's just the main thing there. So, you know, it just depends on your situation and what you're going to be using that back seat for. But if you do want a usable back seat, I would recommend spending a few grand extra and just going up to the CX-5. That has much more space for, you know, just a couple $1,000s extra. Trunk space in the CX-3 is a similar story to the back seats. So, you know, it's a little bit less than even some of the other competitors in this segment, although a lot of them do also have a pretty shallow floor, and that's my main complaint here with this cargo area, is it's just pretty shallow. Now, they did that to make it a level load floor there, so if you fold the seats flat, it'll all be level. But, you know, you can remove that little tray there, and then you'll see it does go down deeper, so you do have a little more space there if you do need it, but it still isn't a ton of space, either as far as depth or as far as, you know, how wide or how long it is. And so, you know, I mean, it's decent, but, you know, to be perfectly honest, the Mazda 3 has much more cargo space in its sedan form. And so, you know, these crossovers, it's, you know, if you want the all-wheel drive, you obviously can't get that with the Mazda 3 currently, although it will be offered on the new 2019 version of the Mazda 3. But for right now, if you do absolutely need all-wheel drive, the CX-3 seems to make sense. But otherwise, I honestly think the Mazda 3 has a more spacious interior, more cargo space, and you know, does it all for a little bit less money as well. But let's start up and go for a drive. The CX-3 here has the nice slim Mazda key that I absolutely love. Nice metal buttons on it as well here, which is a great touch. Of course, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here in the Grand Touring trim especially. So anyway, you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. Alright, so setting off in the 2019 Mazda CX-3 Grand Touring. Well, the first thing that I think you notice about these is you can have a nice low seating position. I actually have my seat up pretty high here just to kind of give me a little bit better visibility, but you can get this seat super low, so even taller folks should be able to really have a nice seating position here in the CX-3, which is really cool. A lot of these other crossovers force you to sit up very, very high, and this one doesn't, which I really appreciate. Other things to note here, though, it's just a really great driving position with everything else with the Mazda. Like I said, everything's very easy to use. It's very easy to see out of as well. You have pretty thin A-pillars here. Good view out of the sides, although you do have, this is common with all vehicles in this segment, since they're so scrunched, the B-pillar is like right next to your line of vision. Whenever you're looking over, it's like you're staring straight into a pillar instead of actually having window. But again, that's something you're going to encounter in just about every vehicle in this segment. And the view out of the back is also pretty good as long as you don't have those rear headrests up. Now, they do have to be up if you have people sitting back there, because otherwise they have to be hunched over. It'd be very uncomfortable for them. So as long as you don't, you know, regularly carry tall people in the back, though, you should have a pretty good view out of the back as well. Other things I'm noticing here about the CX-3, though, early on is just there's such good driver's vehicles. Everything is very precise. There isn't any guessing games. Everything does exactly what you expect it to do in a very natural way. Throttle response is immediate and sharp, even whenever you're not in sport mode here. Brakes also very nice progressive feeling to them, but they are very responsive and start biting right at the top of the pedal. And so all those things, the things that you know use to drive, are the things that are spectacular. But we'll go ahead and put it into the sport mode here. It does have a sport mode, which is really cool that it does. And let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. It scoots. It makes a bunch of fuss and drama. You're not going quite as fast as it feels like you're going. But so anyway, the CX-3 here only runs the 2-liter Skyactiv 4-cylinder engine. Does 146 horsepower, 146 pound-feet of torque, and it'll do 0 to 60 in 8.1 seconds. And honestly, it feels a little quicker than that. That sounds like a very slow number, I know, but this engine is just so eager to rev, and it just immediately just wants to go for it. Not even just in sport mode, but there's a nice little button at the bottom of the throttle pedal. Whenever you're flooring it, when you feel that click, it'll immediately give you a downshift and knows you want to, have all the performance. And I like that. It kind of makes it very clear there isn't any waiting around. or any vagueness. You know, it knows, you know, whenever you stomp on it like that, okay, you want everything, let's go for it. And I appreciate that. And so, you know, it's all running through a 6-speed automatic too, so there isn't any kind of slushy CVT to worry about like many of the competitors that are absolutely dreadful to drive with those CVTs. I still can't stand those, and I'm so thankful Mazda is sticking with an automatic. It makes for such a better driving experience in my opinion. It'll hold gears, and it feels so much sportier, but just so much more natural too. Even if you're not an enthusiast, you just appreciate it, you know, acting normally and not having some weird rubber band thing going on like many of these CVTs do. But anyway, it just, in sport mode, it likes to leave it in these higher RPMs, so it's just, you know, cruising at 3,500, 4,000 RPMs and totally content to leave it there. So again, that makes it even more willing, but we'll go ahead and take it out of the sport mode here. And then it calms down, chills out, but it still is very responsive and gives you all the power it has whenever you request it. So, I mean, yeah, you know, it doesn't have a ton of power, but it really utilizes every one of those 146 horsepower very, very well, and that's again, very commendable. It means this doesn't feel really slow. I mean, yes, it doesn't feel quick, and you know, you're sitting there watching it go nuts, and you're like, okay, I can totally manage this, you know, it's not going to wow you or anything, but it delivers it in a very satisfying way, if that makes any sense. And so it's definitely a better experience, I think, than most of the competitors. Now, you know, you can get, for example, the turbo motor in the Hyundai Kona. That's a little peppier, will definitely give you some better straight line performance. But you know, if you go for the regular engines in any of these crossovers, this one's one of the best, I think. Another thing, we'll go ahead and put it back into the sport mode here, and let's try out the manual shifting. You just slap it over, but then you do have these paddles like I mentioned earlier, so we're just coasting here. Pretty responsive. Try upshifts. Upshifts are a little bit more delayed, but honestly, downshifts are almost like ZF quick. Almost. Not quite, but very, very good. This 6-speed automatic is pretty good from Mazda. It's not best in class or anything, but it does do a very good job if you do want to, you know, be sporty with it. Especially those downshifts. Really, really gratifying, actually. Do another try of the paddles here. Yeah, it's pretty good, you know. It's, again, not amazing, and honestly, like I said, it's a pretty intelligent automatic, so most people, I think it makes sense to just leave it in the automatic mode and just leave it at that. But you know, it's nice that you can use the paddles if you want to, and I really appreciate that. But we're coming up to some corners here. Now, it is pretty cold and you know, a little salty and a little damp in some spots. I'm not going to be able to push it quite as much as I usually do, but still try out this handling. And this is where, I mean, Mazdas are usually some of the best in class as far as handling, and the CX-3 totally fits in with that. This is just so effortless, so light, so sharp. Steering is so accurate, and it's lighter but very precise and sporty, and it just feels great. I just got my camera gear flying around back there, but man, it handles so well. So these are pretty light too, even in the all-wheel drive fully loaded Grand Touring trim. It's still about like 2950 pounds, but man, this engine is sport mode. It just is hanging out at 5,000 RPMs. It's really it just wants to rev its little heart out here and just give it all it's got. It's really commendable. But yeah, this thing handles so well. I'm actually going to take it out of the sport mode just to let this engine relax a little bit. Yeah, it just handles really great. And with the all-wheel drive, you also get some torque vectoring going on too, which I think I actually felt there for a split second. So it's a brake-based system, but it will actually kind of you know, help to tuck in the nose there a little bit, and felt really good. But it just, again, since you have a little bit of a lower sitting position than some of the other crossovers, and just a little bit of a firmer, less floaty suspension than a lot of the others, it just makes for a very good feeling setup. And I mean, I've driven a decent amount of the competitors, not all of them, so I can't say definitively, but out of all the competitors I've driven, this is hands down the best handling one. Runner-up would be the Kona for me. That Kona Turbo was decent handling. It was pretty good for a crossover, but still not as good as the Mazda. And then some of the other stuff that I did, the Nissan Rogue Sport didn't handle nearly this well. The Jeep Renegade, you know, had pretty low limits. It was fun, but didn't handle nearly as well. The Fiat 500X also was a lot sloppier in the corners. Still handled decently well, but this definitely takes the crown in my ranking of all the ones I've driven so far. And so, really, really good handling. I'm impressed, and I've actually already put about 85 miles on this vehicle over the past few days, and it's I enjoy driving it. It's really actually fun and entertaining, and yes, you don't have a ton of power, but for a runaround, especially here in the wintertime when you can't really go nuts anyway, it actually feels really good to drive, and I've actually really been enjoying my time with it. Now the acceleration here, this time I'm not in sport mode. We're starting in second. We'll see how, let's see it immediately. There's no waiting. It immediately figures out exactly what I want to do. I put my foot to the floor and it just goes nuts. And so it's the enthusiast small crossover. It really is just fantastic, and it handles so well too. You know, I think honestly, the handling is basically almost as good as the Mazda 3 to me, which is, you know, usually with a crossover you give up a little bit, you sacrifice a little. This, I don't really feel any kind of sacrifice going on. It doesn't seem, you know, it seems to handle just about as good as all the sedans do. Now we're on some 18-inch wheels, a little bit larger here, you know, some all-season tires. Nothing amazing as far as the tire setup or anything goes, but it handles just really, really well. I think that lightweight really comes into play, but it's also just the way Mazda, I don't know what their secret sauce is for making everything handle as amazingly as they do, but I mean, all these Mazdas are just so fun to drive, so engaging to drive, and very just satisfying to drive on, whether you're running errands or trying to, you know, rush down a back road. Either way, it's just always a good experience. This comes down to exactly what you need. The CX-5 is also a ton of fun, although that doesn't have as good of handling. It is very good handling, but not quite this good, just simply because the CX-5 is higher, heavier, you know, larger, so, you know, that's just physics, but it still handles very good, and it's, you know, probably the best in its segment as well. But, you know, if you are okay with the smaller size, you don't need, you know, as much space as the CX-5 offers, the CX-3 is a great option here. Obviously, like I said, the Mazda 3 would probably still be my pick in this segment and price category, just because you have a little bit more space and, you know, still have great handling. But anyway, I'm going to have this vehicle for an entire week thanks to Mazda here, so I'm going to drive it around for the rest of the week here, and I'll come back and give you guys my final fuel economy, my thoughts on the pricing, and anything else that I noticed during my week of driving here. Alright, so I've been driving the CX-3 for a week now, and I've put about 126 miles on it, and it's been an enjoyable time here in the CX-3. Now, you know, it's just, everything about it is just so accurate. You know, I love how dialed in everything is. There's never been a time during my driving where I've been, you know, waiting for it, or I've been, you know, frustrated by it. Everything is very satisfying whenever I use it. You know, throttle response is great, brakes feel great, steering feels great, handling is great, power is adequate, you know, and all those things just make for, you know, a nice ownership experience, I think. If you were to daily drive one of these, you know, aside from, again, if you're merging onto the highway and need a little bit more power, you know, this might, you know, make you wish for a little bit more every once in a while. But other than that, you know, it's a great driving experience. One thing, though, that hasn't been super great was my fuel economy. Now, this is the all-wheel drive version, so it's not going to be quite as fuel efficient as the front-wheel drive version, but it's still underperformed a little bit from what I was expecting. So these are rated at 27 in the city, 32 on the highway for a combined average of 29. In my week of driving here, I got 24.4 mpg, so a few mpg lower than even that city rating, and I did do a little bit of highway driving, not a ton, but, you know, probably at least 15 or 20 miles maybe of highway driving, and so I was hoping that average would be a little bit higher. Now, it's worth mentioning, though, that I did do a little bit of idling for a while, maybe about, you know, 20 to 30 minutes tops of idling, so that did bring the average down. I did see the average get up as high as like about 25 mpg, so, you know, maybe a half mpg better than what's recorded here now, but still not quite as fuel efficient. And again, this comes down to, you know, a little bit of a heavier weight over the Mazda 3, but, you know, it's not really too far off from the CX-5 either. So, you know, I think as far as, you know, fuel economy advantages go, I don't know if you're going to get a huge amount of advantage out of the CX-3, because I've noticed that I've been driving this vehicle harder and pushing this engine a lot more than I had to in the CX-5 with its extra amount of horsepower. So I think that's kind of what I'm noticing here, is that yes, you have a smaller engine, and technically if you're just coasting along, you'll get better fuel economy. But in real world driving, you know, I'm having to floor this way more often than I did in the CX-5, and so for those reasons, it's going up to redline more often, and so it's burning more gas, and I think that's kind of why the fuel economy isn't quite as high as I was expecting. The last thing I want to mention here about the CX-3 is the price of it though. And this is another spot where it's kind of in a little bit of a tricky situation. So this one as tested is the fully loaded Grand Touring trim. Now the Grand Touring trim is the only way you can get these LED headlamps with the accent lighting and the better visibility at night. Otherwise you're stuck with halogen headlights even on the regular, even base, and also the Touring mid-level trim of the CX-3 still sticks you with those halogen headlamps, which I just really don't like using at night anymore. And so it's kind of unfortunate it keeps it in this higher trim, because it really, the Grand Touring trim, I mean the Touring trim makes some sense, and I can see that being a good alternative to some of the competition and some of the stuff within Mazda. But once you go up to this Grand Touring model, I mean this one's just under $29,000 before the premium package this one has, which you have to add if you want the driver's power memory seat and the heated steering wheel, and also the auto dimming rearview mirror. Those are only in the premium package. Now they're $710. Now I will say the heated steering wheel is great and worth $700 on its own, I think, but that just drives the price up even more. So this one is almost at $30,000. And whenever you're getting up to this vehicle's as tested price of $29,625, that's where you get into some pretty competitive stuff, and that's even within Mazda. I mean, with Mazda, you can basically get the second level up on the CX-5, the Touring trim, with its nicer, leatherette seats, very similar to these, heated seats, all that type of stuff, including LED headlamps. All that is included in that Touring trim of the CX-5 for about the same money, and you get way more space, more power, a larger, nicer feeling vehicle inside, better storage spaces, all that type of stuff. And so it really, if you want an SUV, I honestly think you're better off going for the CX-5. And if you want like the heated steering wheel, you do have to go up and spend a few thousand more. And so even if you want to go base model versus base model, the CX-5 is like $4,000 or so extra over the CX-3. So there is a price jump there, if you're going trim for trim. But like I said, you get some really nice features in the Touring trim of the CX-5 that are also here reserved for the Grand Touring trim of the CX-3, so it's kind of a wash to me. So I feel like you're better off just going for the CX-5, even if you do have to spend a couple bucks extra. And then if you don't need all-wheel drive and you want to stay at the CX-3 price point, you can actually save some money going with the Mazda 3. So it's kind of a tricky situation. Now, compared to some of the other competition, if you have to have a compact crossover for whatever reason, you like the smaller dimensions, you just want a higher ride height, but you want a smaller engine or something, the CX-3 is, I think, probably my favorite in the class. Now, for this price point, again, you can get yourself into a Kona with the turbo engine, and that has more power. Handling isn't quite as good. You do have a dual clutch auto in those, which is a little weirder, not nearly as precise and natural feeling as the 6-speed automatic in the CX-3. So you do give up some stuff. There's a lot of the interior materials are a lot cheaper in the Hyundai than they are here in the Mazda as well. So you do give up some stuff, but if you want more power, the Kona is the way to go for this price point, I think. But if you want a good driving experience, I honestly think, personally, I would rather have the nicer interior and have the better handling, the just more accurate, not having to deal with a dual clutch in the Hyundai. I would go for the CX-3 over the Kona personally, just because I think as an enthusiast, it's a little more dialed into what enthusiasts want and the responsiveness they want, and everything responding to your commands. So the CX-3, it just depends on what you want. I think for a certain niche of people, it will be great. For everyone else, I think there are some other options even within Mazda that are great choices. But yeah, all these Mazdas these days are fantastic. You can't really go wrong with either of them. But anyway, huge thanks once again to Mazda for providing me with the CX-3 to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.